Cheryl Scanlon with Way of Life Coaching, and today we're going to talk about a one bite at a time approach to completing long-term projects and objectives. Imagine that your boss gives you a project to do and says, go do it. You don't have a course schedule to keep you on track. You don't have friends and teams that you're working with to help you along the way. You could always try to cram, which is what we do in school, but the reality is with work projects that rarely works. So today we're going to talk about how you can take a project and break it down into bite-sized pieces so that you're more apt to be able to complete a project. Let's take a simple example to illustrate how this might work. Imagine that you want to plan a birthday party for a friend of yours, and you're wondering, where do I start? Well, typically what happens in those first 24 hours are critical to launching and setting a path for your future success. So maybe you start with simply saying, well, I got to figure out when I'm going to have the date. What am I going to do? So you set a deadline, sort of an end game for when you want to have this complete. In the workplace, you would want to look at something maybe 2 or 3 days prior to the actual deadline date because things always happen. So you set your date for when you want to have this birthday party. Well, then you determine all the pieces and parts that are involved in developing and delivering this birthday party. You have the invitations, the food, a location, maybe even a gift if you want to give them a gift in addition to everything else you're doing for them. And then you determine what has to happen when and create a timeline. So you find a location, and the first thing that happens when you go and talk to the people at the location is, well, how many people? Ooh, so now you realize I need to figure out how many people I want to have at this party. And then all of a sudden you're starting to think, how can I know how many people I want to have at the party? I don't even have an invitation list. So just by taking that first step of trying to find a location after you set the date, now more information becomes available to you to help you figure out what else you need to do. So then you decide you need to create your invitation list, send out your invitations, and then you'll start getting your RSVP. So that first week, if you had 4 weeks to do the party, to plan for this party, that first week, whoa, there's so much to do. But then you're sort of waiting for all these invitations and these responses to go out and to come back to you. And then all of a sudden, that last week before the party, boom, there's so much more to do. Suddenly you have food, you have to get the gift, you want to make sure the location is right now, you want to make sure everybody has been confirmed who's going to be attending the party. There's probably last minute questions. And you realize there's this 2-week window, week 4 planning, and then week 1 right before is tough, but those 2 weeks in between, guess what? You can be working on other things. That's the same thing that happens in the workplace. When you have a long-term project that you're working on, it may start out really, really intense, and you're thinking, I can't keep up this intensity. Well, the reality is you won't have to. There may be time at the end, however, where things really ramp up and you're feeling very crammed to finish the project on deadline for your boss. That's pretty normal. The key is don't wait till the last minute to start. Here's a tip. Imagine your boss is giving you this project, going back to that original example, and you're wondering, where in the world do I start? Start with something. Start with something you know, no matter what it is, within the first 24 hours of that request. And inevitably, by starting with that first whatever it is, other things will start to become more apparent that are the next things to work on. It doesn't mean that you should have known, and it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you if you didn't think through everything at the very beginning. You'll learn the skill over time. The key is to start to set up these smaller bite-sized goals that you can then chew one step at a time to move you towards that end project completion. So what about you? Maybe you're in the process of job hunting and the task seems absolutely overwhelming. Where do you even begin? Maybe you have a new project from your boss and the task seems overwhelming. There's 3 things we'd like to suggest to help you. Number 1, break that task into smaller pieces. And remember that tip of start somewhere, anywhere to get you going. One thing will lead to another. And then number 2, create a timeline for completing the task. Set a self-imposed deadline for yourself, which will help to pull you along in that process. And if you're in a workplace, I recommend trying to set a deadline that is even before what your manager is setting for you. And then finally, the third step, and this might be the most important, is to remember why you're doing this. For example, for the party, you want to celebrate your friend. Don't forget that when you're waiting to figure out who's coming and who's going, and you're writing that next address on that envelope for the 100th time. Keep before you at all times the reason you're doing what you're doing. And that will help to pull you along and keep you motivated as you work through the more granular, nitty-gritty portions of the task. So what about you? When you think about project planning, what do you have in front of you that you might actually be able to use to practice this skill? Are you in the process of buying a car? Maybe relocating to your first apartment? Perhaps you want to learn how to pay your bills better and on time. Any one of those would make a great place to start learning how to do project planning and management. If this is an area that you would like to work, we have free e-coaching available to you. There's prompts on the website that will help you to go through that process. We hope that you'll take advantage of that. Take care.